Hello, and welcome to commentary for kflow, the rock opera video game. I am Midnight Vesper, and we're just going to go straight into this particular speed run. As you can see, there's kind of a little bit of a nice 1-minute intro to kind of give you an idea of what everything is kind of going on. The game can be comprised of about 5 different worlds. Each world is somewhat different in how it actually is portrayed. Each one is different in the thematic overall world, and each world kind of has a different style of music. kflow, the rock opera video game, like the name implies, is an interactive rock opera based musical, or like I said, an opera. So each cutscene, each story is developed through the style of music and only music. The catch with this is it's more European metal music, ranging from the realms of symphonic music or symphonic metal music to death metal music, a little bit of doom, a little bit of gothic style metal as well. Our intro, that you just witnessed, is actually done by Charlotte Vessels of the band The Lane. You're going to be hearing a lot about these kind of different, somewhat bigger names in the symphonic metal kind of genre, especially those from the European. This was created by a Dutch studio called Base Camp Games, and you're going to see more kind of bigger names, more names going throughout the entire area. This is World 1. You'll notice that it's kind of a snowy terrain. You notice that there's a lot of blue colors, there's a lot of different textures here. All this kind of represents the sorrow that is this world. Your main character is known as the Karma Keeper. You basically kind of play judge, jury, and executioner when it comes to how everything is. So what's going to happen here is each world has both a protagonist and an antagonist, and it's up to your job to figure out which is the protagonist and which is the antagonist. You'd hear both sides of the story and then figure out which side is ultimately the side that you particularly want in this game. So what you just saw was also the proto-keeper of the band Boss Dolmans, and this is a independent artist also known from the product of Zeistis. Zeistis was a project done with one of the producers of the game, Eva Von Dijk. I believe that is how it is pronounced. Eva Von Dijk, and it is also done with the Metropole Orchestra, which is a Dutch orchestra, most notably known for doing a lot of work with metal artists. And of course, the soundtrack in this was actually composed as well with the Metropole Orchestra. It's a completely original soundtrack. Everything was written specifically for the game, so there's no have to worry about any type of like DMCA issues or anything else along those lines. What we did was we kind of quickly went. What you just kind of saw, we kind of quickly went out of bounds. And when we went out of bounds, what happened was we circumvented kind of this whole tutorial thing that gives you an idea about how to play the game. Naturally, we know the game exists and we know how to play the game. And so now we have the ability to fly. Dashing and flying are going to be very, very, very important to this entire run as a whole. What you're seeing here is us kind of doing yet another out-of-bounds trick. This puts us pretty much really, really, really well out of bounds. And we skip a number of small introduction cutscenes with the muse and the conductor, where we find out both of those stories. Both are basically lovers, and then at one point the muse kind of gets corrupted and turns on the conductor and kind of develops this different persona. And so our job is to go around, find these particular individuals, hear their side of the story, and then figure out which side we're going to do. So what the little orbs are, that's kind of our attack. You mostly have a one life. You don't really have much of an HP in this puzzle platformer or anything else along those lines. The orbs represent kind of how you play the game, aside from this being a puzzle platformer. So you'll notice the colors between the orange and the purple. Basically, what's going to happen here is when it's all life is kind of in this orange color, this almost rust color, if you will, and then we extract that life to create the karma, and that's all those are karma points. And then once we infuse the karma points, what will happen is we will essentially take that object and bring it back to life. You'll see kind of here how some certain flowers will wilter, meaning, we've took the life away from them. Here, there will be actual sound effects of lower brass-horned instruments. So you're looking at mostly like French horns, trombones, and tubas, or euphoniums, depending on how they actually conducted through this whole ordeal. The white represents wind, so if you get in contact with it, it pushes you back, which kind of creates a different challenge. So as you'll see here in a second, you see the orange kind of rust almost color of the flowers, and we take that life away from them, and you can, if we were able to look at, you can kind of see how it's kind of shriveled up and So, that is the first chance that we get to see of the conductor. What's going to happen here, this is actually where the horns are being played, and this is a giant puzzle area. Like I said, I guess this is a puzzle platformer, to go off and kind of give you an idea of how the game works and all the mechanics and stuff like that. Well, because we're able to get on, get on top of these horns, we're able to clip through the ceiling. And then what's going to happen, as you'll see here in a second, is we're able to infuse and finish the puzzle. Lickety-split. What happens here is I'll actually get inside the horn. As it pushes the air out, it'll actually push the Karma Keeper with the horn, and it'll bypass this particular section. You'll see kind of like little rocks and stuff like that around the area. When you actually play this traditionally, it's kind of an upward view, and you have to dodge those, or else you'll get stuck under them. This is a cutscene. And we're going to bypass this boss fight. So if you went through this traditionally, you'd get another song with the conductor about kind of how he lost his muse. He's really sad. And what happens here is we're going to go around the dungeon, and we're actually going to skip the whole section. Kind of going to go up these trees here. So you'll see here that flying plays a big factor of this throughout the run. So you have a dash. You can dash twice and then jump up, and if you hold the A button, you can eventually use your wings to kind of get where you're supposed to be going for. The game occasionally likes to eat a lot of the commands, especially when you're trying to run and jump at the same time. It won't register a double jump. It'll register one jump as a double jump, meaning that it thinks you jumped already. This is a cutscene, because this game is it's an interactive rock opera. These cutscenes kind of help progress the storyline, and because of that, we normally are not going to be able to skip these particular cutscenes. So for this particular section, the conductor is Mark Hudson of the band Dragon Force. Everyone kind of knows Dragon Force from the big hit Through the Fire and Flames. That was in Guitar Hero 3. And the muse is actually by Canadian singer Alyssa Whitegloose from the band Arch Enemy, as well as very much other side projects. She's been involved with a lot of European-based bands. And here's where the interactivity kind of comes into play. Because, so the music will eventually fade out here, and you can actually do this. You can infuse to free the conductor, or you can extract to essentially help the muse. So there are different versions to these particular songs, and there are different ways you can go through this that actually play about how you actually complete the game. Because of this particular route, the majority of the songs that we pick are going to be the same throughout. And if you notice, where there are certain times in the language where there may be some translation errors, or there may be some symbols that don't appear correct in terms of the subtitle that you would have on the bottom, that's because we're using an earlier build. We actually have to go back to a particular lesser build of this particular game so that we can exploit what happens in World 2. We'll get to there in just a little bit. And so now we get poised to have another choice. We can either extract to help the... We can either extract, or we can actually infuse to kind of determine who wins and who loses in this particular world. And depending on the choices that you make in this particular game will unlock the true ending or a couple other endings. The way it worked normally is because this game, since it's based off of metal music, they actually released the soundtrack as well. You can get it on Bandcamp, I believe now, and you can actually have the soundtrack or the deluxe soundtrack, which has the alternate endings, and it's got some of the background music, some of the world map music, and stuff along those lines. If you go with what the endings are for the soundtrack, you can basically help yourself unlock the ultimate true ending that's in this particular game. We will not be doing the true ending here. So on to World 2. If you had a chance to read mostly some of the text that's in here, the World 2 is kind of based around kind of like protection. And you have this beautiful stone spirit who essentially will go off and kind of like be a moderator. And whenever someone is going through some sort of turmoil or whatever's going through some sort of issues, he will end up basically sucking all of that out to help the entire village. Essentially, he's like a stone that's protecting someone from going to the next section. And if you haven't gone up to him before and taken like your negativity out of the way, he won't let you go past there. And then you have these shaman who are voiced by Lindsay Schoolcraft of Cradle of Filth, and we're going to hear more about Cradle of Filth later on. They are kind of the ones who also kind of help foresee the world that is World 2. But unfortunately, what happens is he gets corrupted by a soul, and by that time he actually loses his mind and ends up kind of destroying a lot of what the world is. And you'll see that kind of go into this. Also, like it says, when the dissonance settles in, this game is very much built around dissonance. It's built around troubling tribulations and how to solve them. So when you get to the world, what you're going to see is you're going to see rust. You're going to see the leaves, or not leaves. You're going to see the plants, the grass that grows really, really ridiculously tall. It has more of that rustic color, and you have the green kind of contrasting palette with it to kind of show a corrupted area that's been, devoid of life, but still has chemicals that kind of run through it. And this is also a particular cutscene. So you see this kind of purple-ish water. Remember how we talk about how purple is devoid of life? So you have this purple ghost that's kind of hovering around this particular lake. And whenever you're on this particular lake, the ghost will hunt you down and take your life away. So that's when that camera immediately pans over and lets you know, hey, you're being watched, you're being hunted. And we're able to quickly pass through that, so the ghost may see us but can't actually reach to us in time. And much like 2, World 1, once again, we're kind of going off the beaten path here. Kind of going a little bit out of bounds. The white orb that you just saw, the white orb is mostly there for a puzzle, which you'll see in World 4. We bypassed this entire world pretty much in general because of that earlier patch. So what you're going to see here is we're going through this particular section, or an earlier build, I'm sorry. And we're going to go through all of these rocks. And what's going to happen is we're going to turn around. We're going to go up this way. And for some odd reason, there's a trigger here that triggers the end of the level. They patched that out later on. And unfortunately, fortunately for us, we were able to, go back to that earlier build so we can actually do this. So in World 2, we already talked about Lindsay Schoolcraft being as the shaman. The guide, or the stone creature that you see here, is Mark Jansen of the band Epica. Once again, we're going to echo back to Epica and Cradle of Filth later on in this particular game. So you're going to see a lot of these pillars here. And there's a lot of cutscene of just scenery. Because the game thinks that now that we've actually gone through and, completed the level, we talked to all the shaman. We recruited all the shaman who go to the guide to say, hey, you're hurting. It's okay. We're here to help you. Let us help you and stuff like that. So this game also, it was encompassed by 2 acts. Act 1 is Worlds 1 and 2. Act 2 is Worlds 3 and 4, and essentially 5. Some people call it an epilogue. It's just, it's a completely different world. World 3 here is the longest world that we're going to have. It's also the most platformy world we're going to be interested in. It's a very royal-themed world. You kind of hear that here through the music when it has a very triumphant, it's very, you think of royalty when you hear this style of music. Once again, our narrator by Charlotte Vessels of Delane is indicating here of the story of this particular planet and why the dissonance happened. So before you got here, there was a beautiful ruler. He was doing everything right for his people, and he had a son and a daughter. One night, the father, or the king, if you will, had a sudden death. The point of it is, theorized, I believe, of something else. But what happened was he never made a rightful heir to the throne. The female, the Moon's sister, voiced by Eilise Ride of Amaranth, believes that she is the rightful heir to the throne because I believe she is the older sister. But the son brother, voiced by Tony Kako of Sonata Arctica, believes that since he is the son brother, and because he is the next, because of the normalcy of kingdom and stuff like that, he believes that he is the rightful heir. And this is creating the dissonance, this is creating the struggle, and this is where you come in to figure out what's going on. So once again, what's going through here in particular is we're trying to collect more karma points so that we can go off as quick as we possibly can to essentially go out of the traditional realm and not worry about collecting as much karma points, because we do need those karma points. This is one of the few levels where karma points is a big factor in how to progress throughout this particular level. Once again, you'll particularly see that in this particular level, it is the most platformy. We're going to be doing a lot of bouncing. We're going to be doing a lot of roundabout stuff. Also, if you notice, I was holding the controller up and facing it towards the camera. This world has a particular love of crashing because of the fact that we're using an earlier build. For some odd reason, when I hold the controller up to the camera, it doesn't crash. That is actually the bird goddess that you see here, kind of the mediator of everything. Also explaining kind of, what wants to know what you're doing here, but understands that's why you're here. The bird goddess is voiced by Mariangela Demetrius of the band Tristania. Once again, there's this big theme of these recurring artists that were big in the mainstream. This also had an Indiegogo campaign, which it met very, very well. It's one of the few for its time, because this came out in 2015. So it was a very, 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 very successful campaign. I believe it raised $500,000. I believe is what the actual amount was. And what we're doing here is we're kind of going up this main pillar because, we're gonna be skipping a lot. There's a lot of kind of background areas that we're not supposed to be around upon that we actually use to our benefit. You notice also I almost fell off. This is a very, very, very particular area. The hitbox, or not the hitbox, but the ground is very giving, but there's still that when you're jumping, if you dash a little bit too much or not enough, you can easily fall. On the bottom, there's like an orange circle, and that's mostly what I use there to kind of help guide me through this particular area. So we kind of go in and out very, very fast of where the game wants us to go versus where we want to go. So you'll see times where we're gonna hop from point to point to point, so that we can go off and quickly do this. So here, once again, we're kind of we're not supposed to be through this area at all, but we're going to skip through this whole entire world here just by kind of passing through here. And so what we're going to do here is actually we need to save, and we need to use that checkpoint to our advantage. Now, because of the way the game's built, unfortunately, I did fall off, but that's perfectly fine. If we didn't fall off, we would just wait for the save point to finish doing its save point, and then we would reload the save, because if we don't, these little areas that you see right here wouldn't appear, therefore we wouldn't be able to continue the game here. So this is kind of a boss fight, so to say. Because this is Act 2, it introduces a little bit of more kind of mechanics that they were going for. And so you'll see here the bird goddess is actually going to go off and essentially shoot air at us. And it's also going to be using the tail to end up kind of throwing a whip that will throw us further on down. So again, like for this particular section, you don't necessarily have to die, but if you get hit by the wind or any one of these objects, it throws you back on this boss fight. So again, while everything here is pretty much scripted, as long as you know the right patterns and stuff, it can be a little bit tricky if you don't necessarily know the patterns. And again, like you don't actually die, so you can theoretically be stuck here for a long time, but after a while, you kind of understand the patterns and where everything is, and then you'll eventually get past it. The game prior to this doesn't think that we unlocked this in the game, because there's other parts earlier where you have to go through this whole section, and we skipped through all that. That's another reason why we reload the save. So that kind of auto-scroller boss fight is taken care of. Now we get the Sun Brother with Tony Kako, who stops the bird goddess of like, what are you doing? You know, what's going on? And then he looks over to the Karma Keeper, who says, you know, my father told you about, you know, who you are, who you claim to be, and that you're here to solve our issues. Let me take you down to the water, where the Moon Sister is. So the Moon Sister is actually underwater, where she resided. That's also kind of another point that the Moon Sister thought that this world would be better off if it was covered in water, and the Sun Brother also thought, no, that's not a good idea at all. And so now we're underwater. We do have a little bit of underwater mechanics, and instead of flying now, we kind of have a motor in the back that can help propel us a little bit more underwater. So this is pretty much how you would normally play it. You'd use those green leaves to push yourself up, but thanks to the community and some of the other runners, it was discovered that if you go all the way to this particular section, kind of out of the beat, out of everywhere, and you kind of walk around until you hit a save point, it actually triggers you to the boss fight, the middle of the boss fight. So you already skipped, you know, another song. We skipped maybe about 5 or 6 songs at least at this point, And what happens now is we have this giant fish that is being hunted by that the moon sisters sent upon us to essentially kind of get us out of this area that she doesn't want us, and she sends her buddy, this giant fish, to try and take care of things. Each one of these the first two take about 10 hits to trigger the fish to essentially be attacked by this mist. I believe it's mist. I'm not quite sure. The third one is you just kind of jump on this thing back and forth until the cutscene plays. But this way, you don't have to worry about being hit by the fish and thrown into those little purple puddles that you see, and then end up having to do the whole fight all over again. Keep in mind, though, you can actually die still right in this cutscene. If the fish hits you the right way, you can still hit one of those puddles and eventually die. Well, not necessarily die, but you have to fight the boss again. But everything I know, there's a lot of metal music that's involved with this. Everything here is 100% original. The costumes are fantastic. The design, I shouldn't say costumes. The design of the characters are very, very well done. This is a very independent game. And so now we have ourselves another cutscene here. These are probably the longer cutscenes that are in this area or in this run. The Moon Sister decides to pay a visit to the Sun Brother to settle the differences. Now that they have the Karma Keeper there, they're able to both kind of essentially say, this is our argument on both sides. We want to essentially try and figure out what the Karma Keeper says is the right decision. You can see it here, like right as that happened, they actually do care for each other, and they actually do want to be with each other as family, but there's still that turmoil of they can't solve their differences on who should be the rightful new heir to the throne of this world. So the interesting thing about this is you're supposed to be traveling this direction, but when you actually spawn, when the cutscene happens, you're actually facing north, and you want to be heading, I believe, west. I don't know why the game did that, but the game does that. Also, because we're also in an earlier build, during this cutscene, during this whole time, we actually still have control of our character, the Karma Keeper. So when you watch throughout this area, you'll still see the Karma Keeper making actions. You'll see the dummy, the Karma Keeper that's supposed to be just kind of standing there listening in and figuring out every discussion. But if you look in the background, you can still see a Karma Keeper continuously move around. This sets things up so that as soon as this song is done and we get to be able to do our next action, then we are completely 100% able to do it right then and there, frame perfect, and not have to worry at all about moving around, wasting time. And so what we do is we end up taking the power away from the Moon Sister, and we're going to end up having the Sun Brother kind of rule over the land here. And what the Sun Brother does is, because, you know, he's a good brother and everything like that, he ends up trapping the sister, putting her in a bubble and throwing her in a somewhat prison, I guess you could say. But we don't necessarily know in this particular game, because there's no other sequel, there's no other outside story, whether or not he decides to let her go, or they solve their issues, or anything else along those lines. This is just kind of what we are built upon. Now, you can actually go into that particular, like, if you actually decide to go all around the area and really kind of explore it, you can actually go inside that, and there's really nothing there. Nothing. There may be like a hidden trophy, you know. That I don't think there's one in that particular one, but I think there's one somewhere else. That if you're a completionist, that would be where you would go to find another trophy to get a beautiful little achievement saying you did this, and then you could go off and do everything else like that. This is World 4. World 4 is probably the not the shortest one, next to shortest one, I'd say, for this particular one, but it's also the one that's been explored a lot of the most recent. You'll see a big out-of-bounds trick here in World 4. We skip all the songs in World 4 as well, so there are no songs in this particular world. As much as the community likes the hero and the heart, unfortunately we do skip it, so we don't hear anything from Henning Basset of Mayan and Daniel Dejol from Textures. It's probably one of the heaviest songs that's also in this. So the story of World 4 is mostly kind of like an internal side story, because you have the hero and the heart. The hero is the one who's kind of like building the entire community and telling everyone around this particular planet to work to build things and to keep the industry going. The heart is more along the lines of, yeah, that's nice and all, but we also want to care for our people. We want to also take care of everything like that. And there's the dissonance there, because the hero wants something and the heart doesn't want that. So once again, you kind of see that we're taking an alternate an alternate pathway to get kind of to where we need to go, without kind of, so that we can skip all these songs and skip all these like little interludes and melodies and stuff along those lines. And so what happens here is we're waiting for the game to essentially load, or to hit the checkpoint that was in there, and then we're going to warp to a completely different area so that we can skip a little bit of an extra section and go off and complete the quest. Remember when I said earlier about the kind of white orb fella that was there? Well, the white orb individual is mostly there to do our quest. So this is really the big quest we have to do about that. So we have to collect a certain amount of karma points to progress and open up the next section of the video game, or the world, I should say. Again, kind of with the platforming, kind of with the puzzle area. They're scattered about they're scattered about the area, and then we have to quickly figure out what is and what is not our best optimal strat. For the purposes of casually playing, there's no particular order as long as you get the right amount. But for the purposes of the speedrun, we found this as a way to be the quickest and most effective way that you can do this. We also are implementing a little bit of marathon safe strats in here. There are times when you can that you can jump and skip some of these pillars, but for the purposes of this, we are actually still implementing a little bit of marathon safe strats here, just to make sure we can not waste any time and make sure the game runs smoothly, or the runs smoothly. And we're gonna drop down here, and that's the last one we're gonna get. If you look on the bottom there, there's pillars kind of pushing out. That's part of the actual. That's actually part of the one of the actual puzzles that are in this particular world, for this particular section. Unfortunately, we do bypass all of that. Kind of by warping, we're able to bypass all of that, and by using all of those orbs that we needed, we're able to go down here as scripted. But this is not the scripted part. So we're gonna go here, and we're pretty much out of bounds at this point because we're not supposed to be here. This is not anywhere in any way, shape, or form where we would normally be in terms of playing the game casually. And so now we're going to fly around. Staying out of bounds. Kind of looking at the top of the screen, trying to figure out where we are actually located. And when we get to a certain point, we're going to drop. And then we get this section revealed to us. Now, what's happening here is we're so far out of bounds that we're going to try to quickly get right back in to this particular section where we would be at the near the end of the World 4, where you kind of see a little bit of the heart. And that's mostly what we use to kind of get past this section. So we do kind of drop down. There's, like I said, there's kind of the ceiling here. So now we're getting back in, and we use the heart as a as a guide to get us where we needed to go, so we can just fall straight down and complete that world. And then on to World 5, also known as the epilogue. You'll notice this is very much like the beginning of the game. This echoes the very beginning of the game because essentially this is where the creator and the destroyer live. And naturally, the creator is the one who kind of using all of these to put the worlds together, and then the destroyer is the one who also decides to dismantle everything because it's not going according to their plan. Now, again, we also said that we were going to discuss Epica and Cradle of Filth. The creator and the destroyer are voiced by vocalists of those two bands. The creator is Danny Filth of Cradle of Filth, and the destroyer is Simone Simmons of the band Epica. These are all on a timer in the game, so we have to wait for everything to kind of go through. If we jump a little bit too much, we can lose time by dying, by falling off. With this is kind of a tricky area, only because one wrong move and you can just fall off. You can see how everything's just kind of very much on its own little area, and if you can, there's a lot of areas where you have to reset the level. Now with these pipes, with these pipes, there are kind of different ways to do it in the speedrun. I like doing it that way and kind of boosting my way through it at the end. Again, this is not the right way to play this game, but for the purposes of us, this is what we do. And then once we get here, we're going to take a giant leap, and I like to put the Karma Keeper basically right in the middle of those three objects, because we have to use that middle object to get where we need to go. I also use the boundaries as a way of when I know to jump the second time. And when we fly down all the way over here, this is also a particularly very, very tight spot, because as you can see, like one wrong move and you are falling down. We're gonna have our extra jump there, which I forgot to mention. So in World 4, we actually get this particular extra jump here. It's a boost, that's what I should say. And we only use it here, but we use this to boost, and it basically creates a higher jump for us. So if we fall on the boost and use the boost to our advantage, then what's going to happen is that gets rid of one jump, and we still have that second one to push us a little bit farther. We use that as a way to make sure that we go straight to the checkpoint that's here, and we're gonna instead of getting to the checkpoint and getting all of that, we're gonna end up falling straight down. Or just gliding down until we get to that particular checkpoint because of how large the box is. Not necessarily hitbox, but the box is for knowing where it is. Till we respawn here, which is basically the final puzzle of the game. This is an auto-scroller based on a 3D platform. So while it looks like you're on a 2D, traditional style, you're actually not. It's still a 3D world, and you can... Like, even when you're flying through that, if you fly too much to the left or too much to the right, you can fall off and miss your target and completely die. This is also on a timer, so that when the song hits at a certain point, then the cutscene will play regardless. But the problem is these pieces will eventually, as you can see, they appear, they will, after a while, disappear. So you can't just stand there and do nothing. You have to continuously go forth, but once the part of the song triggers, it'll automatically play this cutscene. And this is kind of our last, particularly hard section. We got to jump through there, and you have to make sure your Karma Keeper is facing to the right before you can jump on that, because occasionally the game may not register yourself as being able to jump, so you'll just jump straight into that box and then just fall. That's kind of the last trick of the game, too. From here on out, we basically make a choice on whether we want to have our final song be either from Danny Filth, the creator, or Simone Simmons, the Destroyer. For this particular version, we end up using Simone Simmons, and when the cutscene starts is when time happens. And that is kflow, the rock opera video game.